Thank you so much for joining Dental Marketing Theory, a podcast by Gary Bird. In today's episode, Gary talks with Dr. Zach Korwin. Dr. Zach is founder and CEO of APE Dental. Automated patient experience takes the pain out of building a loyal patient base, boosts your online reputation, and increases referrals effortlessly. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, as all of those things really help to get the word out about dental marketing theory. Hope you enjoyed today's show.
Hey, Dr. Zach, we are live. It's good to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that we've been doing with all of our guests is walking through how everybody has gotten into the dental industry. So I'd love to hear your dental journey.
Yeah, it's a little bit more convoluted than I guess it should have been, but my dad is a dentist. And so, growing up, he owned a practice. He's been practicing, on his own for 35 years-ish. And so I grew up in his office filing charts and making copies and doing stuff like that. And I never wanted to be a dentist. I never wanted to get into it. And so I ended up going to college to do video game design, believe it or not.
Wow, that's actually really cool. I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I went to school in Rochester, and then part of the curriculum was that you had to do what's called a co-op. So you have to work in the profession in order to graduate. And so I actually could not even find a job in the industry. I couldn't even find an unpaid internship in order to fulfill that requirement. And so I said to myself, if I can't even find an unpaid internship, how is this going to work for me as a career? So I ended up switching majors halfway through to this pretty obscure major called packaging engineering, which is like the design of packaging.
Oh, that's cool. So that's like marketing.
For large corporation. It's marketing and also more marketing in combination with the engineering of the actual packages themselves.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think about, but corrugated cardboard, how strong is it? Is it going to survive this journey from here to here? And, do we really need to use the most robust one, or can we use something a little bit, more
That's
delicate?
Really cool.
So, yeah, it was an interesting field. And so I worked in that for a little while, and it was a little bit too much work in cubicles for me. And so I wanted to work with my hands more. I wanted to be, around people more. And then my dad was like, hey, why don't you check out dentistry again now that you're an adult? So I did. And I went back and worked with him. I worked as a dental assistant in his office for 2 years. And then I, did all my prerequisite courses for dental school that I never did in college. And I ended up going to dental school, and here I am. So yeah, it was a bit of a roundabout journey. It would have been a lot easier if I just decided to be a dentist when I was 5. But.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've noticed a lot of dentists had parents that were dentists or major influences in their life that kind of steered them that way. The one common thread that I have seen, though, anybody who's not a dentist, so someone like me, we're all here by accident, total by accident,
Right.
Literally every single person. So I love your unique journey. So how did you get into APE Dental, and how did that happen, going from a dentist to over to APE Dental?
So I was part of a startup DSO that's no longer a startup. It's pretty well established. And so my thought in developing this thing was I developed it sort of for my own personal use within the DSO. So the whole goal of it is basically, when you're in a group practice setting, or you own a lot of practices and manage a lot of dentists, how do you make sure that each dentist is treating patients the way you want them to treat the patients, right? Not just the quality of their dentistry, but I think, you probably relate to this more, the patient experience, right? So how do you maintain that, A, at scale, and B, if you have an owner doctor who's been there for 30 years and leaves, and you have an associate pick up, the associate doesn't have any ownership. They don't, they come to work, they want to collect their collections and then go home at the end of the day. So I designed it really as a management tool for myself, for a number of reasons. For me personally to use, but then also to roll out to a number of people to get the same benefits.
Okay, got it. And so, tell me a little bit about working inside the DSO. Like, what triggered you to want to do this?
That's an interesting question too. So, a little bit more about my journey in dentistry. So, when I graduated dental school, I worked with my dad, who was still practicing, for a couple of years, and then we moved from New Jersey to Connecticut, and I couldn't still practice with him. So, I was working with him a few days a week, and I worked in a couple of other offices a few days a week. And one of those offices was a DSO, and so I got a lot of experience with the more cookie cutter type DSO, similar to a an acquisition, and this is the way you do things now kind of
Yeah. So
DSO. So
very systematized and processed.
yeah, homogenous, right? And so I didn't enjoy that particularly, but I learned an incredible amount there of what to do, what not to do. And so when we were moving to Connecticut, I called up a recruiter actually, and I was like, I want to find a private practice to work in. And she was like, okay, that's great. But I also have this guy who's starting up a DSO, and maybe you'd like to talk to him just to get a feel for it. It was really like it wasn't even a thing yet. It was just an idea. And so I spoke with who is now the CEO of that company, and we sort of had the conversation that if we can build it from scratch in the right way, then we can avoid a lot of the problems that the DSOs tend to have when they get to a certain scale. And so that was my excitement in getting involved in that type of practicing, was that, really there's been a lot of people who've come before, and that has a lot of value because you can see the mistakes they've made and learn from them.
Hmm. Okay. So, yeah, one thing that popped into my head as you were talking about this and the patient journey and kind of building this out is, so what I've seen is you can have somebody who does excellent dentistry from a clinical standpoint, but the patient journey is horrible, right? And then on the flip side, you can have somebody who does horrible dentistry from a clinical perspective, but the patient journey is amazing, right? And it's like, and the patient doesn't always know that they got horrible dentistry. I'll give you an example. One time I had somebody from a company shoot us a set of photos of dentistry that the office had did and said, hey, can you put this up on the site? We put it up on the site. It looked really good from what I was looking at. Their smile looked great, right? Like it was a remake of the smile. The dentist called me freaking out saying, how could you put this up on our website? And I was like, what do you mean? And he says, this is wrong and this is wrong. Like from a clinical standpoint, because another dentist did it at their office. And he said, this is not what we're aiming for clinically. And I was like, I had no idea, right? Like literally their smile looked amazing. Like I would have paid for a smile like that, right? Like, so there's a big gap in those two things, right? There's a big gap in what is a patient journey, and then there's a big gap in what is excellent clinical work. So are you solving some of that from?
Well, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
Oh, I just wanted to know, are you solving that gap, or are you solving a different gap?
Yeah, that's what I'm targeting. So in my experience, usually the more successful the practice is, the more it is in that second boat that you were describing, which is that the clinical outcomes aren't as ideal, but man, oh man, do they love that doctor, and they love that hygienist, and they go in and it's like Cheers, and it's everyone knows your name, and it's that great family experience. And so it's interesting, right? Because as a doctor, you want the good clinical outcomes, right? That's the thing that at the end of the day, you can sleep at night when you get a good clinical outcome. But from a practice success model, and especially again, doing it at scale, you want good patient experience.
Yeah.
So that's exactly my company is automated patient experience. Like the whole point of this thing is to have a consistent patient experience that is controlled not by human beings, but by a computer, which basically knows exactly what to do and will do it for you. That's the complete intention of it.
Got it. So how I know one of the biggest things inside of any dental practice is patient referrals, and it's something that can be lost very easily. I worked with one office, and they had a hygienist quit, and their new patients dropped by about 30%. And of course, they called the marketing company. Our patients are down. And we're looking at all our analytics, and we're going, traffic is up, new patient calls are up, everything's up. Everything looks normal. And then we get to patient referrals and it's like, oh, your patient referrals dropped like dramatically. What happened? Oh, we had a hygienist quit. Oh, okay. So walk me through what you guys do to help with that side of it, the patient referrals and getting those patients to refer their friends and family in.
So you know better than me probably that patients refer. The most likely time for a patient to refer is the first time they walk into your office when their expectations are blown away, right? And working in marketing and dental, you have a huge advantage, right? Because what are patient expectations for a dental office? The guy looks like Hannibal Lecter and it's going to be a painful, mess and it's going to smell terrible, right?
Yeah.
Right. So as long as you don't like actively murder someone in the waiting room,
Yeah.
you already are winning, right?
Yeah.
So, the key to the whole thing is really making that first interaction so beyond their expectations that they're at that point so just floored by the whole thing that they tell their friends. And so I'll give you an example of this. This happened to me the other day. So I had a new patient coming in, and what APE does is it basically acts like a personal assistant, right? So it tells me, hey, you have this new patient coming in. Here's the script that you should send them. I already filled in the patient's name. I already filled in your name. All you have to do is click this button and it'll message that patient, right? So I didn't do anything really. I mean, the email came to me. I went boop, and then the patient, gets this text message from me the night before their appointment. And it says, hey, it's Dr. Korwin. Do you have any questions before your appointment? I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And the person's wife texted me back and said, basically, oh my God, we don't really have any questions, but thank you so much for reaching out. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Looking forward to seeing him tomorrow. So anyway, next day, patient comes in and I walk into the room and the wife is standing there and she like stops me on the way into the room. And she's just like, I just had to meet you. I am so taken aback that you remembered, you made the effort to reach out to us the night before.
Yeah.
And he was a little bit anxious, and it really meant the world to both of us that you reached out. And I had to meet you, And I was like, oh, that's great. Secretly, that I didn't, the computer basically did most of that for me.
Yeah.
And
that's a rare thing too. In any medical profession, that's a rare thing today, right? Like you just don't see that anymore.
Totally. And, I think about it from my end. Like, if I went to see my ear, nose, throat doctor and, he texted me afterwards to be like, hey, how's everything going? You know what I mean? It's just, it just doesn't happen. We don't live in that kind of world, the Norman Rockwell world of medicine, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so she says to me, this is literally before I've even seen her husband. She says, I already made an appointment when I came in and I already told 2 of my friends and they're calling to make appointments. And I literally hadn't even met the actual patient yet. I didn't look at him. I didn't see him. And it turned out he needed, it's probably $7,000 worth of dental work. And we,
easy.
booked him for all the treatment because he was mine. You know what I mean? He was mine already, right? And he's not a referral patient. He came by way of Google. They just randomly found us. And, there you have it, right?
Wow.
Which is that I blew away her expectations and I didn't really do much of anything other than do what the computer told me to do.
That's so cool. Yeah. One of the things that I really work hard in our sales process, working with SMC from a marketing standpoint, when clients are coming in with us, is I try to kind of scare them off of marketing patients because it's important that they understand that marketing patients don't trust them. And sometimes people come to us and they've never done marketing before, right? So they're just like, yeah, we're just going to do marketing. We have 40 patient referrals. We're just going to add in marketing and we want to go to 80. And I'm like, okay, what you just said to me, and let me use a different industry. That's like saying, hey, we make cars and they're gas powered cars. And now we're going to make electric cars. So we're just going to start doing that. It doesn't work like that. There's trust that has to be earned all the way through that for them to be able to buy from you. And it's really, doctors usually say, well, they're shoppers or they're low quality patients. And what I usually say is they're low trust patients. Patient referrals are high trust. So what I'm hearing you say is that you hacked that. You took a marketing patient and you turned them high trust really, really quickly. And I absolutely love that. So I would be interested to know, like, do you have any data like tied into like how this impacts an office, like percentages or anything like that you could share with us?
Yeah. I've been tracking this stuff for, it's been a product I've been using it, myself and internally with a number of offices for about 3 years. So it's not a new product necessarily. as much as you may have never heard of it, it's only been something that I've been marketing to other people recently. So I have a lot of data on this stuff. And so it actually turns out exactly what you said, is that it turns these marketing patients into referral patients by the level of trust they have. And it increases the case acceptance rate for those patients by 50%.
That's insane. For
It's
marketing
huge, right?
patients?
For marketing patients.
Yeah.
So it's massive, you know what I mean? And the funny thing about the technique is that it's not new. This is not new to reach out to your patients, right? I mean, anyone who was starting their practice was doing this before they had kids, and they
didn't have any bunch of patients coming through the door. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not as if I invented the ability to do this kind of stuff. The only thing that this does that nobody else really does at all is it makes it consistent, right? I mean, that's the big secret to success in marketing and life and anything is, show up, right? Just show up and do it over and over again, and that's where the success comes from. So that's what computers are good at. I had a conversation with a friend of mine when we were in dental school who was a neuropsych major at the time, and so we were talking about it, and he's like, hey, you ever think it's weird that like a basketball player, if he hits like 90% of his free throws, that's like really good? And if you built a robot and the robot only hit 90% of its free throws, you'd be like,
broken.
Yeah, this thing sucks. What's wrong with it?
Or
right?
you could use like self-driving cars, right? If self-driving cars drove and they had a 1% error, they would be banned everywhere, right? Like it would.
That's exactly it, right? So computers have to be perfect. That's why we invent them, is to fill the gaps where people are just that's just not the way your brain works. It doesn't work to be consistent. So this is the whole point of this thing.
That is so cool. I really like that. So what are some? So right off the bat, and I'm a marketing guy, but what I always tell people is, so when you're building out a practice, a healthy practice has about 60-40 patient referrals to marketing. And what I tell people is if you can get really good at turning those marketing patients to high trust and turning them back into referrals, then you don't need to spend as much on marketing, right? If you can get that scale to tip 70% to patient referral and 30% to marketing, guess what that does to your marketing budget? It shrinks it. And you get off of that addiction, I call it, of marketing, where you're using marketing patients to fill gaps where maybe operations is weak and you're losing people out the back door. You can get away from that. And so I see that your product, and I've never used your product, so I'm just walking through it right now with you and learning about it. And I can definitely see where there's an opportunity for that. How do you get, so it sounds like you probably have to get some participation with this software. So walk me through from the office side, who needs to participate and to make this APE Dental work?
I call it a semi-automated workflow instead of fully automated. Mm-hmm. There's some aspects of it that work in a fully automated way, which is basically you just set it and forget it, and that's the end of it. Again, you probably know better than me. Someone said this to me the other day, and I was like, oh my God, that's so brilliant, which is that dentists want everything to be 100%. There is no such thing as 99% for a dentist, right? Like when you speak to a marketing client, you know what I mean? It's like,
no, it's 100. No,
well, this didn't get a.
So dentists are perfectionists, and that's what makes them a dentist,
absolutely.
Right? That's why you get into dentistry as a perfectionist, is because you can really control the outcomes, and you can really get that perfect smile from a dental perspective, right? From a dentist perspective, that serves really well for dental. In business, it's devastating, right? Because there's no such thing in business. You'll never even get to 90% in business, all right? Like you're striking out. It's like baseball. You're striking out way more than you're getting hits.
But that's still a win, right? And if you were to explain to a dentist like, oh, we did this mailer and we got a click-through rate of 5%, and you're like, oh, wow, you know what I mean? And they're like, oh my God, how dare you?
Yeah.
So it's, perfection is not really achievable in that way, right? But so there's patients who come in that essentially my whole thinking with this as a dentist myself is if the computer ever messes anything up, then I hate it and I'm going to turn it off, right? And so if you had a patient who came in and they were a problem patient and they left the office screaming at you that they're going to sue you, and then all of a sudden they get a text message, hey, leave us a review on Google.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Well, good, right? That's the end of the software. So I created what I call like a semi-autonomous workflow, which is where it does everything but make the decision, right? So if you imagine you had like a personal assistant and they would say, hey, I remember that we have to do this and I already wrote the letter and I put the stamp on it. Do you
You just
want
had to
me
give
to
it the
put it in
thumb
the
up.
mailbox?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And
Yeah.
so that's the involvement that you have to do. Everything runs in this program on a single button press, and the single button press is just yes or no to prevent it from ever really
Yeah.
making a stupid mistake.
So
That's
so
the
if you
reason.
see, so how much time are you spending in it as the dentist every day?
Every day, 3 to 5 seconds.
Like
I
literally?
contact probably, nothing. I mean, nothing, almost nothing.
So you're just going through and saying, yeah, send these out to whatever 10 patients that I saw today?
Yes. That's it.
Okay.
And then, that's essentially the end of it. I also have it so that, the responses are also prescripted if you want to do it that way. So most of the time, like if you text someone and say, hey, how's your tooth feeling? And they say, everything's great. Then you just say, okay, great.
Got it.
So that's a single button press that's programmed into it as well. So you don't have to, you shouldn't have to do anything. That's the whole point of it, right? So you get all of the benefits from it and you make almost 0% of the effort.
Wow, that's really cool. So then on the patient side, so you got the interaction on your side, so it's all loaded. It knows what your new patients are. That's all done for you. You're just pressing a button saying boom, 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 boom. Yeah, send this out. If there's a problem patient, obviously you're going to hit no. And then you have templated text messages that just checking on you, making sure everything's good. And those are super easy. That makes sense. What about on the patient side to get that interaction back? What kind of interaction level are you seeing on their side? Is there anything that you're having to do to prod them? Is it all just done in text message? So it's not really like they have to download anything? Like, how does that work?
Everything is done through text message and email. There's nothing you have to log into because that's prohibitive.
Yeah.
So from the patient side, if you were my patient, you would just get a text from me and it would say, hey, Gary, it's Dr. Korwin. I just wanted to see how you were feeling. That's it. That's all you would get.
What's the interaction rate that you see on that from sending?
Like 99%, basically.
Almost
so
everybody.
As long as you have their cell phone number, they text you back.
Yeah.
And so what I actually did also, which you might appreciate, is that I have a machine learning algorithm which analyzes the patient response and then essentially grades it as a positive or a negative response. And so I use that as a net promoter score for the doctors and the hygienists who use it, because show me one other thing in the world that's getting a 99% net promoter score response rate, right?
No,
it's
So walk me through that. How does it grade it? Like, walk me through the grading system, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
So the grading system is basically, I'd say, hey, Gary, how's it going? And you'd say, oh, everything is great. Thanks so much for checking in. That's a green mark. You text me back and you say, I'm bleeding to death and I hate you. That's a red mark. And so it analyzes basically what's called the sentiment of the message to see whether or not it's a positive or a negative sentiment. And it uses that and then turns it into a pie chart with, analytic data on how someone's being treated. And so the value of that is A, you get a massive amount of response.
Yeah.
But B, if you're managing associate dentists, right, and you're an absentee owner, right, you have the office and it's 100 miles away from you. And what are your options as far as knowing whether or not an associate is doing any good from a patient experience standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
One is, we got a bad Google review.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Two is, patients are leaving. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So
lagging. You're talking about lagging indicators versus,
right.
yeah.
So this is an extreme leading indicator of anything being a problem.
I guess it's still lagging, but it's super close to when the patient's coming in. It's way closer than a Google review. You're only going to, if you tick off 10 patients, only one of them is going to leave a Google review, right? Like, you have to really tick people off to leave Google reviews. And then people to leave practices, we don't find that out until the 6-month mark, right? Like, they just don't come back to their next cleaning appointment. And that's way too long, right? So you're a lagging indicator, but you're right on top of the actual appointment. Now, question for you. So if you have somebody that just replies like, thanks, how does that get graded? Is that a positive response, a negative response?
It gets graded as a neutral. Yeah, it's a neutral response. And I count neutrals. It displays it in the pie chart, right? So it's positive, negative, neutral, or mixed, which is it couldn't figure it out. But most of the time what ends up happening is neutral and mixed responses are generally positive responses, right? Because a lot of people text back and I'll be like, hey, how's it going? And they'll be like, well, it's still like I took out a tooth, right?
Yeah.
It still hurts a little bit, but thank you so much for checking on me. You did a great
So
job.
that's a positive.
That's gonna be a mixed response though, right? Because it
Oh,
still
because the pain,
hurts
yeah.
is negative, but it's positive, right?
Yeah.
So usually a mixed or a neutral response is actually a positive response, but it does break those out separately.
Got it.
But I count them as positive because there's, negative is pretty extreme. Like I am bad.
Yeah.
There's nothing redeeming
So
there.
what's like a rate? So like what's a rate of good versus bad on patients? Like what kind of mix ratio are you seeing? 70-30, 80-20, 90-10?
Good in a good provider, it's usually about 65% positive, and then about 20% mixed, and then 15% ish, bad to neutral.
And then so
Because
like
there's some people.
walk me through that 15% bad. Like what are you seeing back? Because I think you're getting information a lot faster than most people. So what is that? I would be interested to know that.
A lot of it is dependent. It's very practice and provider dependent, right? So if you're a doctor who is an endodontist, right, and you just do root canals, or you're an oral surgeon and you just do extractions, like what are the responses you're going to get from people most of the time versus me as a general dentist where I do a
If you're doing
5-second
Invisalign,
laser buccal pit filling, you know what I mean? Like there's no way that patient's having post-op pain, right? And so if you're an oral surgeon, like you're going to get mixed responses a lot more frequently because they're going to say, hey, this thing still hurts, or I'm bleeding, or this is happening, but thank you so much, you did a great job, you're the best. So you have to look at it within the context of the practice.
I totally get that. But let's get out of the mixed response and let's just look at the negative response, because here's the thing I know from a marketing perspective. People are losing patients at a way bigger clip than what they think they are and what their numbers are telling them. So what I mean by that is that everybody's like, oh, our hygiene retention rate's like 93%. Well, what they're doing is they're taking all of their patients of all time, and then they're getting this recare rate. What they're not doing is they're not looking at the low trust patients and seeing that they're really recaring at like 20% or 30% or 40%. They don't even see that number, and they have no idea that's happening. And that's what creates glass ceilings in a lot of these offices, is that they're like, well, let's spend another $5,000, and it doesn't go up anymore, it doesn't go up in proportion. And the reason why is you're losing those patients out the back door, but they don't see that. So I'm really interested in that 15% that you're looking at. Like what's driving that?
The negative responses are in a general dentist's office, usually post-op sensitivity in some way. It hurts or it feels too high. It's usually, frankly, it's usually bite related. It's some occlusal problem that's causing it.
Okay.
Or, which is an easy problem to solve, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I have insight into what's going on there, right? And so that's not a particularly hard problem to solve. There are products out there,
but it's very disruptive to life.
Well, it's a big problem for the office too, right? Because if you're thinking about a practice running on a profitability perspective, right? Every time the patient comes to your office, there's a setup and breakdown charge that you have to pay your assistant, and there's a
cost. There's a hard cost. There's a fixed cost. Yeah.
So if you're taking, let's say you are in network with a lot of insurances, you're taking a 50% write-off on some of your fillings, and so your profitability on doing a filling on a patient is, let's say it's only like $20 or $30, right? And then they have post-op sensitivity and they have to come back for an occlusal adjustment, and it costs you $50 to set up the room. So you lost $20 on that patient, from the get-go, right? So there's a lot of value in looking into that kind of data to see where improvements can be made. But to go back to your question, I mean, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of bite is off. This is a problem. Some people have issues with cosmetic stuff. I want to change this or that.
Yeah.
With extractions, it's,
do they ever respond that they don't like the doctor or something, or no, because it's the doctor texting them? I imagine that they probably would say.
No, and what is really, really interesting about it is that I know some of the doctors who are using it personally, and I know that they are not the most personable people. And even still, their feedback is fantastic from patients. So you can actually overcome your own, personality flaws with just being nice.
Yeah, being nice and reaching out. Yeah, because you're doing something that no one else is doing in any industry in medical, right? So you're really going that extra mile. And then the other thing is, I think we create this false reality that we think that everybody wants this like really cool dentist, or like I don't. I want my dentist to be kind of, a brain and a little bit of socially awkward, right? Like that would be normal to me.
The
That
TikTok dentist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want them doing TikToks while I'm getting my surgery done, right? And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there, I think, and that's such a good point that you can make up for some of that, right? Where if you're a dentist and you're like, you know what, I didn't come into dentistry because I was social. I'm a technician and I'm good at it. This helps you close that gap. I think that's amazing.
And that's me. I have difficulty building relationships with patients. I try hard, but I'm an introvert, and so it takes a lot of energy for me to do it, right? And so, it's hard to relate as not a dentist, but like if you're in the middle of like an extraction and a root tip breaks, and then your hygienist calls you to come in and do an exam, and like your head is in the broken root tip and you're covered in blood, and it's like, I mean, I do it sometimes. I walk into the patient's room and I'm just like, well, you got teeth, they're still in there, I'll see you later, right? And so it's, it takes energy to really do that kind of stuff. And by the end of the day, I'm drained. I am completely tapped out. And the thought of, really going the extra mile for these patients, which I do, but it takes work, right? I get home and my kids are screaming and I gotta help get them ready for bed and do all this stuff. And like, it's my personal assistant too. Like, it's sort of like the hair club for men. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm also a client. Like, I love it because it cuts so much time off of my routine of doing this for patients, and I get all the benefit. I just don't, I don't even do the work. I just get the benefits from doing it.
That's so awesome. I love this. And so where do you see this going? Like, is this obviously you're going to build this company out. I think you're going to help a lot of people, but is this just stage one of what you're building, or is this like the main thing you're focusing on, or where do you see this going?
It's kind of stage one. I mean, it's the tip of the spear a little bit. I think that there's obviously stuff it can't do, right? I mean, that there's a lot of value that comes from building systems in a practice and doing that kind of stuff. So I think eventually, I've been talking to maybe a couple of practices about doing some, broader consulting on, hey, like this works great, but we're having problems with this and this. And it's like, all right, well, you need a human being in there to really work through that with you. So that's where I, sort of see it expanding to. But, the product in and of itself it's such a no-brainer to me. And it's been, it's a product launching, right?
Is there anybody else? I haven't heard of anybody approaching this problem in this fashion. Is there other people in the market that are approaching it this way?
No, nobody does this. Nobody does this. That's what I thought. It's completely unique. And so that's a problem from a marketing perspective.
It's totally, because you have to educate.
Yeah, exactly. So it's easy to say, hey, I'm the Uber of this. And it's like, oh, I get it, but like to get it out there and explain it to people, it's been, to me who uses it and to people who really get it, it's like, oh my God, this is such a no-brainer and it works so well. But there's that education aspect of getting it into offices. But it's been, it's been spreading. It's been getting out there. I've got a lot of customers going. So it's been very successful, and I hope it continues.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think this is a great tool for marketing. As soon as we finish up with this podcast, I want to talk to you about some opportunities I might have. And is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have brought up about what you do or about who you are?
Just about, I mean, the product itself, I would say there's more to it. I mean, it's automated patient experience, right? So it's focused on the whole patient experience. There's other things that it does in order to try to close the back door like you're describing. I've heard it described as a bucket with holes in it, right? So you don't want to pour more water into it because everything's leaking out the bottom. So I built some systems into it to basically close the holes in the bucket, right? And what I did was I used essentially a workflow that is recommended, best practices, right? Which is you reach out to a patient 3 times over the course of 3 months with a week in between the first contact and 6 weeks, right? So that's all built into this system automatically. So as you're using the software, you don't actually have to do anything other than tell it yes. So there's a lot more, the workflow of it, which is that it does everything and you approve it, is applicable to a lot of the systems that take place in a dental office. So there's a lot that goes into that whole patient experience aspect and essentially closing the holes in the bucket. What it doesn't do right now is fill the bucket, right? Which is where companies like yours come in order to get more people in the top of the funnel.
Yeah, if you don't have people coming in, it doesn't matter.
You can.
And then you
do your
you
best.
can be super high touch. You can FaceTime them every night after FaceTime.
Right, when you only have 3 patients in your practice,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, this has been really good. Very, very educational. I talk to people like yourself all the time. I haven't seen anything like this. So I think you're definitely onto something. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us today. Very educational and really helps me understand where there's some more gaps in that patient journey.
Yeah, thanks. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much.